That gets us to the actual last section on new and enhanced features. And this is where I really struggled, right? What if I don't know, the ones of you who already looked at the PDF, you've seen that the PDF that I put in the space has, I think, 155 slides. I mean, I can talk fast, but 155 slides in 90 minutes gets us closer to a cinematic experience. And that's what I don't want to do. So what I had to do is I had to pick certain things that I actually want to discuss, right? But I still left everything in the deck. So especially in this section, you'll see way more slides in the PDF that I will cover. And I start with L, also known as AI, first. I mean, L is everywhere today, right? And we have shown this, demoed this at various events. And it's happening now. Right? It's actually happening, closed captions and live transcription during Webex calling calls. It has to be enabled in Control Hub, as you can see here at the organization level. And then these guys show up in your Webex app on the mobile device while you're in the call. We support a number of languages. Initially, I think when you follow the communication around this feature, in the initial communication, we always only mentioned 5 or 6 languages. These guys here, English, German, Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese. But by the time we released the feature, we added these other features here, other languages as well. The language settings are only available after closed captions have been turned on. And currently, these closed captions are only available for live calls in the app and on the desktop. Sorry, the app on the desktop, not available for conference calls and not for recorded calls. Background here is basically the number of streams, right? When we record a call, we already fork a call to the recorder, and then to be able to do this, we would need to fork a different call to the transcription service. Another feature that we added, I think that's really powerful, is the personal call routing or personal assistant. How many of you have seen this, looked at this? Very few. So the background here is when a user steps away from their desk, they want to have or they should have an easy way to route their calls to a different number and set up certain greetings to tell the callers why they are not available, right? And we basically defined a set of predefined greetings. You can see this, or almost can see this in the screenshot here. Lunch, on the phone, whatever. And then the user, the personal call routing can be enabled. Then you can define a time frame and one of the reasons, okay? And this then leads to the following experience. An inbound caller will hear an announcement why you're not available, and then the call gets rerouted to the destination that you defined. And that's also supported on the APIs, of course. And we also support the option here to differentiate between external and internal calls and call routing rules. And again, my favorite caveat here, the correct operation of this feature depends on correct inbound call classification, so don't break call classification. I mentioned that earlier. Don't mess with this. Never set your call handling, your unknown number handling to legacy, and don't abuse enterprise dial plans for talent hop-off, because these are the 2 most reliable ways to break inbound call classification. Hand group call busy. Hand groups, we didn't have busy treatment on hand groups yet. New feature, it's now possible to basically set this option, divert calls when all agents are busy or the hand group is busy. The agents can be allowed. It's an option. The administrator can allow the agents to change the hand group busy status. And we defined 3 feature exit codes here, hash 51, 52, 53, to enable, disable hand group call busy or get the hand group call busy status. It's also supported in the APIs. There are no dedicated endpoints for this. We just enhanced the data structure on the existing endpoints to manage hand groups and added these 2 options here, basically group busy enabled and allow members to control group busy enabled. So 2 new attributes were added to the data structures. Timeout routing in the auto attendant. Explicit handling of calls that stay in an auto attendant for too long, or basically, if they don't press a key, then we can now define a handling like after 3 seconds or after 10 seconds, what do you want to do? Disconnect the call, play a message and disconnect, or transfer the call, right? And there's also a repeat timer that you can configure. Multiple customers asked for this. I think it enhances the options for auto attendants significantly. This can not only be managed in Control-Up, it's also supported in WxC CSV. So we added new columns here, these new columns in the auto attendant WxC CSV to set these options. And they are also supported in the APIs. So we enhanced the existing endpoints for auto attendant management and added a data structure in there that allows to set all these options. So as you can see here, there's the number of attempts up there, then the action to be performed, play message, transfer without prompt, transfer with prompt, transfer to operator, transfer to mailbox, or disconnect the call. You can put a greeting here, and then there's also a transfer destination if needed, and an audio announcement file that can be set. So this feature can be provisioned in Control-Up, bulk provisioned in CSV, or bulk provisioning using APIs. Directed call pickup and barge in. Prior to this feature, there was no way to limit barging of calls. If you enable barge in, I mean, there was no limit who could barge in on whose calls. So now there's an option at the user level where you can enable privacy for directed call pickups and barge in, and then you can explicitly add users who should be able to use this potentially compromising feature to barge into calls of this user or to pick up calls from that user. And this is also, this new feature is also supported on the API side for users, virtual lines, and workspaces. Agent notification tones. When a supervisor decides to barge into an agent call, right? Either barge in, silent monitoring, or coaching, you can now configure whether there should be notification tones, and you can do this in the queue settings here. Sorry, you can do this in the queue settings, and these are dedicated settings for barging calls, silent monitoring, and supervisor coaching. By the way, these notification tones are always only played to the agent, not to the caller, right? Hopefully you're aware of this. All right, multiple shared lines and virtual lines on devices. The background here is, prior to this, you could already add a shared line to a device of a user, but only one instance, one line appearance. With this feature, you can now add multiple appearances of the same shared line to this phone. And that's required to implement stuff like, for example, N-key rollover, right? Multiple calls coming on the same line, and someone who uses the shared line appearance should be able to answer all of these instances. Pretty interesting feature. For us, it was kind of interesting to do the true up of these features for existing customers, because we had to basically make sure that we end up with consistent indices, but looking back, this went smoothly. We had literally no customer where this broke anything. End user access to call settings. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? When we started Webex calling, it was kind of a simple solution, right? And now we're adding more and more complexity to it, making it more and more complex, more options, more this, more that. So now we're starting to hear more and more almost complaints from your end. You're making it too complex. Why are you doing this? Easy answer, because you asked for it, but that's It's not our hobby to just invent new stuff to make it more complicated. Behind every one of these features that I presented, there's at least one customer who asked for it. But the fair feedback is that then administrators tell me, okay, I might be able, with proper training, to understand what's happening, but our users are just overwhelmed with the number of options they see in User Hub on their side. We need to be able to limit these options. And that's what this is about. So the administrator can control end-user call settings, which end-user call settings are actually exposed to the user. Right? So we can hide calling settings, voicemail settings, device settings, all of these things. And that affects both the User Hub, the Webex app, when we expose features there, and also devices. And that's the main and only use case is to simplify the end-user experience. When the administrator disables these features for the user, the administrator can still provision it, right? But the users don't have access to it. They cannot override this. And we can do this both at the organization level, global setting, and we can also do this per user, right? So per user decide which settings should this user have. There's full API support there for this. Here, two endpoints, settings, permissions, get and put to read the settings and update the settings. And the impact is, as I mentioned, when you turn something off, these features, what's that? These features don't appear in User App, in the Webex app. Sometimes it takes some time for the changes to reflect in the Webex app because we do not push the change. It usually only gets updated in the Webex app when the Webex app re-registers, or basically pulls this information again. And then when we turn off something, the user cannot manage these features anymore through the phone, for example. So if we disable call forwarding, then the user cannot set call forwarding on the phone anymore. And also feature access codes are blocked, right? So that's complete. And users, then we have user level settings called settings for me. And all of these are then also blocked. So the users, even if they figure out how to use APIs, cannot override this. There's one limitation, though. We cannot hide any features accessible through third-party devices because we don't control them, and room devices. We don't have access to those as well. All right, and then down here is the documentation link with more details. Then we created templates for Webex calling features. There are a lot of features that can be configured on a per-user level, and your feedback was, we need a way to automate this. If we have a group of users where we want to configure the exact same set of settings, we don't want to touch each user individually, and we don't want to use bulk provisioning. There should be a better way. And that's why we came up with this idea of templates, where you can define settings, and then there's a priority of settings. If there's a setting done at the user level, that overrides the settings template, and then the last priority is settings at the org level. So basically, we introduced a new level where you can configure settings for a user between the user level settings and the org settings. These templates can be assigned to groups or locations. The way this works is, when you have a template, first you configure the settings here, right? And then these are the settings that you can put in the template, and then you apply it. And then when you want to go back to what's configured outside the template level, there is an option to basically here, if there's a template applied at the user level, you can click on reset, and then this will reset the users back to what's defined at the org level for that user. This is a very recent change. How many of you have seen this, that suddenly PSTN moved in Webex Calling and Control Hub? All right. How many of you were surprised by this? Yes. All right, so yes, that's a surprising change, and also maybe a change where you go, why would you even do this, right? The background is we need to make sure that customers that only consume Webex Contact Center but not Webex calling also have access to PSTN settings so that they, for Webex calling Contact Center, can use the same location level premises, on-premises trunks, the same number provisioning and so on. And that's why we came up with this idea of basically moving the PSTN from within the Webex calling area and control hub and make it available global. It introduces this new overview page here, and I have to admit that this also creates what we all probably would consider an inconsistency. That now certain things like route lists, for example, that are specifically only relevant for Webex calling, now get moved out of the Webex calling context and end up here in this area, right? So the only thing I can say about that is, I'm sorry. If you had to move it, deal with it. You're not moving it back, right? But after I've been working with this new thing for a few weeks now, the number of times I actually go to Webex calling and try to use configure numbers, the ratio goes down, right? So I'm pretty confident that over time we all get used to this new location. I'm just trying to give you some context why we did this. It was not absolutely not about annoying you. There is actually a good reason behind it why we did this. Hopefully this helps you to understand why we did this. This one's interesting. We just added this, and it's not only done in the back end, it's also supported for on-premises PSTN via local gateway. We introduced a new header, a pcharge info header or PCI header. What's the background? When you look at SIP and identities in SIP calls and a SIP invite going out to the PSTN, there are multiple headers in there. There's the from header, there's the PAI header, the P asserted identity header. The provider you send the call to wants to build the call, right? They need to identify who do I need to charge for this call. All right. Most trivial assumption would be, let me just use the from header. Wrong. Why? If the call got transferred, right, then it's not the from header because we passed the original identity out again from the original caller. It would be the caller who basically transferred the call, who redirected the call. For that, in SIP, we have the diversion header. So the service provider actually has the challenge of identifying, looking at the call flow, and basically going, all right, if there's a diversion header, then I use that as the identity I build that stuff to. If there's no diversion header, I try to do the from. That's kind of hard to handle for them. And we wanted to create consistency, make it easier, either for the provider or for you on your SBC, where you then basically can insert that correct charging identity in the header where your provider expects that, and that's the PCI header, the pcharge info header. You can enable the PCI header at this level here, okay, at the location level. And when you do this, on the trunk level, when you do this, then this new charge number setting in the calling section of each location shows up. All right, and then you can pick a charge number for that location. And this is the logic here behind it. If the PCI support setting on the trunk level is disabled, then it's set to primary number, which is this first one here. This charge number setting is not visible. The only scenario where you can actually manually configure a specific fixed charge number is when this location level setting is set to customized charge number, and then you can pick a number here, and this number has to be a configured number. It has to be a primary TN, cannot be a toll-free number. It can be the location number, if not toll-free. And if you don't configure something here, there's a fallback to the PAI header that we already sent out. So important thing, if you ever struggled with these billing scenarios to correctly identify the identity or the charging target, then this PCI header support should help you. There's also an API support for this. There's one endpoint to figure out which numbers you can potentially assign, and then there's an endpoint to actually set the location level PCI configuration. Another one that we added recently is the ability to record emergency calls. You know that we had recording and Webex calling for quite some time, and now there's an option to globally enable recording of all emergency calls. This applies to emergency calls, to test calls, and also to PSAP callbacks. And this is only available for users from users, workspace, virtual lines, not for trunk services. So not for trunk calls coming in from dedicated instance or from calls that originate in Webex Contact Center. This recording, when you enable this, then all emergency calls get recorded, even if recording isn't configured for the user placing the call. Right? So this overrides personal level settings. The way this works is there's org level settings here, record emergency calls, and then you can override its location level, and then there's a caveat here or a note basically telling you, hey, if you enable this, then these emergency call recordings, you cannot pause them, you cannot stop them. There's no announcements, it's just plain recording, right? And even if the user is configured for recording with the option to pause and stuff, not gonna happen. This overrides everything, right? Of course, there's API support for this. And this one I mentioned earlier, we now allow hunt groups as ECBNs. Prior to that, ECBNs had to be active numbers assigned to users or workspaces. The general recommendation is at the user level to always use the phone number that is actually assigned to the user for obvious reasons. You want the ECBN to go, the callback go to that user specifically, and only for users without phone numbers, then you use an ECBN. Either the ECBN defines a location level or you can have multiple. And the nice thing is you can now do hunt groups, and then the hunt group members would probably be users in your location, in your organization, that are responsible to properly handle incoming ECBN calls, incoming PSAP callbacks, right? This is an internal thing, almost internal. You probably know, or you should know, that in the US, all emergency calls are handled via WxC, and we have this HELD Plus protocol with WxC to basically reveal the location information. A lot of customers have fixed devices that are provisioned in a certain location and never change the location. With this feature, what we start to do is we actually start validating of the civic address, of the street address that you put at the location level, validate that against the emergency calling location database in the US, and then based on that validated static civic address, we will send out location information using a standardized format in the SIP invite. It's the PIDF LO location format that's basically an XML format of a geolocation that's sent with this invite. You'll start to see this also, this can be used by providers. And long-term, the idea here is for us to enable more flexible emergency call handling, not only in the US, but also outside of the US. So this is kind of the first step that you are seeing here of a evolution of capabilities with respect to location information for emergency calls. This one is really interesting. As you might know, we do support Cisco-managed devices, Cisco-managed third-party devices, and we need a consistent way, we need to define a consistent way how to manage device settings for all these devices. Like there could be hundreds of settings, right? And if one of those third-party vendors comes up with a new setting, we don't want to have to go into Control Hub and then every time update Control Hub. So we came up with a model that makes it easy for us to enhance that. We support this via public APIs. And from now on, you basically will see this structured display of dynamic device settings for Cisco-managed devices in Control Hub. And this looks pretty similar to the device settings that we also do for Phone OS devices. For customers outside of the US, this guy is really important. Caller ID display on MPP phones. What we used to do is we, in quotes, normalized the caller ID to something that can be displayed on the phones for, stuff like this, where we just remove the sprinkles on the top, right? And this kind of works for locals, right? And this looks completely wrong, but at least it's almost, you can almost identify what it is. For Japanese, it doesn't work so much, right? Because we translate all these Japanese characters to either dots or dashes. And that's not Morse code, that's just plain wrong. So basically, to solve this problem for Japanese customers, we introduce new UTF-8 fields here where they can actually put in caller ID names in their locale, and we will then use these names on MPP phones. And this obviously also applies to other countries where this problem or this challenge exists, starting from Germany, where we have umlauts, to Slovak languages, and of course also for Japanese. The last one here for devices is the bulk resync. As you might know, typically devices reach out to Control Hub, to the back end, as part of a nightly resync around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to pull the latest configuration. Sometimes this is not enough. Sometimes administrators ask us for an option to force a resync for a bunch of phones after they updated bulk settings. And this is what we now allow you to do. In the Devices tab in Control Hub, you can use the search functionality here, search for device types, location types, tags, and whatnot. And then for the set of devices that's displayed, you can select them all and then do a bulk resync and ask all of these devices to pull their configuration from the system. And it can be up to 1,000 devices at a time. And that basically kicks off a job to update the device settings, and the job's progress you can then track via the task scheduler in Control Hub. This one, I need to make you aware of this. In the past, all right, so what happens if your license expires, your Webex calling license expires, your subscription expires? What happens? It goes into a suspended state. We start sending emails to an administrator telling you, you need to take action. Otherwise, we will cancel the service, right? Experience shows, for some reasons or others, either these emails end up in some spam folder or are not taken seriously, or only get found the day after we actually canceled the service, right? Which is actually too late. Because as soon as this suspension period, right, ends, we cancel the subscription. And canceling means we remove the configuration of that tenant from our backend. And removing means it's gone, right? As in away, gone, zero, done, right? Say again all after good morning. It's a destructive operation, and the restoration is best effort and often incomplete. And this happened a lot. So what we are now trying to do is we try to increase the pressure on the administrators, or raise the awareness, I think it's the positive term for it, by playing an announcement. So for every user or workspace on a suspended subscription, when they place an outbound call during this suspension period, they will get an announcement. Your subscription is suspended. Please contact your administrator. And this will hopefully increase the caseload at the customer and raise the awareness to avoid this situation that we, and let's be on the same page here, that we rightfully terminate a subscription, right? Just because the customer, for some reason, ignored this problem or whatever, right? But be prepared. You might start to see cases from your end users asking, why am I hearing this weird announcement, right? And that's why. The recovery from a license suspension actually is pretty easy. You can resume the subscription by paying for a new subscription, right? Like insert a coin and then it starts to work again. You can also, and I think that's the more typical use case here, you can also replace the licenses from the suspended subscription with licenses from a new subscription. Right? To be fair, sometimes customers move to new subscriptions and just forget to assign the licenses. Right? They have the license and just forgot to assign them. So that's also an option. And then there's also, you can raise a ticket to request temporarily to resume the subscription. But be prepared. There's starting, I think, this week, next week, you might start to hear these announcements, right? And that's the background. And it's just to save us all from this really bad situation that we basically delete data, remove data from the back end when the suspension period ends and cause a lot of trouble for all of us.